It was a super quiet Saturday afternoon. The kind of day where everything feels slow and easy, like the world is taking a big lazy nap. The sun was shining bright in the sky, making everything warm and golden. Little birds were chirping happily, hopping from tree to tree in a sleepy little neighborhood. This place wasn't big or fancy, just a bunch of small houses lined up along a quiet street. Kids sometimes rode their bikes here, but today it was extra calm. No noise, no rush, just peace. On the front porch of one of those houses sat Jake Miller. Jake was a regular guy, not too tall, not too short, with messy brown hair and a friendly smile. He wasn't doing much, just sitting in an old rocking chair, the kind that creaks a little when you move. Next to him was his dog, Rusty. Now, Rusty wasn't just any dog. He was a big all-K9 pup, which means he used to work with the police. Yep, Rusty was a police dog once. He was trained to sniff out trouble, like bad guys or sneaky stuff people tried to hide. He had a big nose, floppy ears, and fur that was a mix of black and brown. But right now, Rusty didn't look like a tough police dog at all. He was sprawled out on the porch, fast asleep in the shady spot under Jake's chair. His tongue was hanging out a little, and every now and then he'd let out a tiny snore. To anyone walking by, Rusty just looked like a lazy furball, soaking up the quiet day. Jake loved that about Rusty. He loved how his big, strong dog could just relax and be goofy sometimes. It made life feel simple. Jake didn't need a lot to be happy, just his porch, his chair, and his best buddy Rusty snoozing nearby. He leaned back, closing his eyes for a second, listening to the birds and feeling the warm sun on his face. This was his favorite kind of day. No work, no worries, just him and Rusty chilling out. Life was peaceful, or at least, that's what Jake thought. But here's the thing, quiet days don't always stay quiet. Sometimes something sneaky is waiting just around the corner, and that's exactly what was happening right now, even if Jake didn't know it yet. See, someone was watching him, not in a nice way like a friend waving hello. No, this was someone who didn't like what she saw, someone who didn't like Rusty one bit. And this someone, she was about to make this calm, sunny day turn into a big, loud mess. Who was she? Why was she so mad about a dog who was just sleeping? You're going to find out soon, so don't go anywhere. This story about to get wild. Let's picture it for a minute. Jake's house wasn't huge, just a little place with white paint and a small yard out front. The porch was his favorite spot. It had a wooden railing and a few steps leading up to it. There was a table next to his rocking chair with a glass of cold water on it, dripping a little from the heat. Rusty was stretched out so long that his paws almost touched the edge of the porch. His tail wasn't even wagging, he was that sleepy. Jake had his feet propped up on a little stool, and he was wearing a plain blue t-shirt and some old shorts. Everything about this moment screamed relaxed. It was the kind of scene you'd see in a picture book about a perfect day. But perfect days don't always last, do they? Nope, and this one was about to get flipped upside down. That someone who was watching, she wasn't far away. She was just down the street, peeking out from behind her curtains. Her house was bigger than Jake, with fancy flowers in the yard and a shiny mailbox that said HOA President on it. HOA stands for Homeowners Association. It's like a group that makes rules for the neighborhood. And this lady, she loved rules more than anything. Her name was Karen, and oh boy was she a handful. Karen wasn't like Jake. She didn't sit around relaxing. She was always busy, always looking for something to fix or complain about. If your trash can was out too long, she'd write you a note. If your grass grew a tiny bit too tall, she'd knock on your door with a frown. Everyone in the neighborhood knew her, and most people tried to stay out of her way. But today, Karen had her eyes locked on Jake's porch, and what she saw made her huff and puff like a dragon about to breathe fire. What did she see? Just Jake and Rusty minding their own business. Rusty was still snoozing, his big head resting on his paws. Jake was sipping his water, not bothering anybody. But to Karen, this wasn't okay. She didn't like dogs, especially big ones like Rusty. She thought they were loud and messy and didn't belong on porches. Never mind that Rusty wasn't barking or running around. Never mind that he was asleep. Karen didn't care about that. She saw a big dog, and that was enough to make her mad. Now Jake didn't know Karen was watching him yet. He didn't know she was standing there, arms crossed, her lips pressed into a tight, grumpy line. He didn't know she was already planning to ruin his day. All he knew was that the sun felt good, the birds sounded nice, and Rusty's little snores were making him smile. He had no clue that trouble was sneaking up on him like a cat stalking a mouse. Let's talk about Rusty for a second, because he's a pretty cool dog. Back when he was a police pup, he was the best at his job. He could sniff out anything, hidden toys, lost stuff, even bad people hiding from the cops. Jake used to work with him every day, running around town, keeping everyone safe. They were a team, like superheroes without capes. But now Rusty was retired. He didn't have to work anymore. He got to sleep all day, eat treats, and hang out with Jake. And Jake, he was retired too. He didn't wear a uniform or carry a badge anymore. He just wanted a quiet life with his furry best friend. That's why this day felt so perfect to Jake. After years of chasing trouble, he finally had a chance to sit still. No emergencies, no loud sirens, just him and Rusty enjoying the peace. He looked down at his dog and grinned. "You're living the good life, huh, buddy?" he said softly. Rusty didn't even open his eyes, just wagged his tail once like he was saying, "Yep, sure am." But peace doesn't always stick around, does it? Not when someone like Karen is nearby. She wasn't just watching anymore, she was moving. She stepped out of her house, her phone already in her hand. Her flip-flops slapped against the sidewalk as she marched toward Jake's place. Her eyes were narrow and her mouth was set in a scowl. She looked like someone who'd just found a bug in her cereal and was ready to yell about it. Now Jake didn't see her yet. He was too busy enjoying his day. He took another sip of water and rocked his chair back and forth. The creak of the wood mixed with the bird songs, and Rusty let out another sleepy snore. Everything was calm. Everything was nice, but not for long. Karen stopped at the edge of Jake's yard. She stared at Rusty, then at Jake, then back at Rusty again. Her nose wrinkled up like she'd smelled something bad. She didn't say hi, she didn't wave, she just stood there, glaring like Jake and Rusty had done something awful just by existing. And in her head, they had. To her, that big dog on the porch was a problem. A big, furry problem she was going to fix. What was Karen going to do? Why was she so mad about a sleeping dog? And how was this quiet day about to turn into total chaos? You're going to find out, because this story is just getting started. Stick around, because what happens next is so crazy you won't believe it. Here comes Karen. Yep, that Karen. You know the type. She was the boss of the neighborhood HOA. HOA is a group that makes rules for everyone who lives there, like telling you how to keep your house looking nice. Karen loved those rules more than anything. She was the kind of person who'd pull out a ruler and measure your grass. If it was even half an inch too tall, boom, she'd write you a note saying you broke the rules. Everyone in the neighborhood knew her, and most people tried to stay out of her way. She wasn't mean all the time, but she sure acted like she owned the whole street. On this sunny Saturday, Karen was walking by Jake's house. She had her head up high, her flip-flops smacking the ground with every step. Her nose was wrinkled, like she'd just smelled something stinky. She stopped right at the edge of Jake's yard and stared at the porch. Her eyes locked onto Rusty, Jake's big dog, who was still fast asleep. Rusty wasn't doing anything wrong. He was just lying there, his big paws stretched out, his tongue flopping to one side. But to Karen, he looked like trouble. Big trouble. That dog shouldn't be out here, she snapped. Her voice was loud and sharp, like a teacher yelling at a kid for running in the hall. She pointed at Rusty with one finger like he was some wild, dangerous beast ready to jump up and cause chaos. But Rusty, he didn't even twitch. He was so sleepy, he didn't care about Karen or her pointing finger. Now Jake looked up from his rocking chair. He was still relaxed, sipping his water, not worried at all. He shrugged his shoulders and said, "He's sleeping, Karen. He's not bothering anyone." His voice was calm, like he was talking about the weather. To Jake, this wasn't a big deal. Rusty was his buddy, just taking a nap. What was the problem? But Karen, oh, she wasn't having it, not one bit. She didn't like Jake's calm answer. She didn't like Rusty being on the porch. She didn't like anything about this. Her face got all red and she puffed up her chest like a big angry bird. "I'm calling 911, she shouted. "That mutt's a menace and I won't stand for it." Her words came out fast and loud, like she was trying to scare Jake into agreeing with her. Jake blinked at her, then he chuckled. Yep, he laughed a little, because who calls the cops on a napping dog? That sounded silly to him. He thought Karen was just joking or maybe trying to boss him around like she did with everyone else. "Come on, Karen," he said, still smiling. "He's not hurting anybody, relax." He leaned back in his chair, thinking she'd give up and walk away. After all, Rusty was the quietest dog on the block right now. How could anyone be mad at that? But Karen wasn't joking. Not even a little. She didn't walk away. She didn't calm down. Instead, she yanked her phone out of her pocket so fast it almost fell. She held it up like a weapon, her fingers punching the numbers 9-1-1. Jake's smile faded a bit. Was she serious? She couldn't be serious, right? But then he heard her voice, loud and screechy, yelling into the phone. "Help, there's a vicious animal loose. Send help now." She was packing back and forth in front of his yard, waving her free hand like she was in some big emergency. Jake tilted his head, watching her. Vicious animal, Rusty, the dog who was snoring so loud you could hear it from the street. This was getting ridiculous. He set his water down on the table and crossed his arms. "Karen, he's asleep," he said again, a little louder this time. "Look at him. Does he look vicious to you?" Rusty picked that exact moment to let out a big, goofy yawn, showing off his teeth for a second before flopping his head back down. Jake pointed at him. "See? He's not even awake." Karen didn't care. She didn't even look at Rusty. She just kept talking into her phone, her voice getting higher and higher. "Yes, it's a huge dog. It's dangerous. I don't feel safe. Hurry." She was acting like Rusty was about to leap off the porch and chase her down the street. But Rusty, he didn't move, not an inch. His eyes stayed closed, and his tail gave one tiny wag before going still again. Now Jake shook his head. This was too much. He couldn't believe Karen was making such a fuss over nothing. He thought about getting up and telling her to stop, but he didn't. He just sat there waiting to see what would happen. Part of him still thought she was bluffing. Maybe the police would laugh and hang up. Who would take a call like that seriously? A dog sleeping on a porch wasn't exactly a crime. But here's the thing Karen didn't know. Trouble was already closer than she thought, way closer. See, Jake and Rusty weren't just any guy and his dog. They had a secret, something Karen couldn't even guess. And that secret, it was about to make this whole mess a lot more interesting. While Karen was yelling and packing, something was happening, something she didn't see coming. The air felt a little thicker, like when a storm about to roll in. Now Jake's easy smile stayed on his face, but his eyes got a tiny bit sharper. He wasn't worried, not yet. He knew something Karen didn't. What was that secret? Why wasn't Jake scared? And what was going to happen when the police showed up? Karen thought she was in charge, but she had no idea what she'd just started. This quiet day was turning into something loud and crazy, and it was all because of her. Rusty kept sleeping, Jake kept sitting, and Karen kept shouting. But soon, everything was going to change. Stick around, because this is where things get really good. Jake leaned back in his old rocking chair, nice and slow, watching Karen lose her cool. She was stomping around in front of his yard, her flip-flops slapping the ground like mad. Her face was all red and she was waving her arms like a crazy bird. She was still yelling about Rusty, Jake's big dog, who was snoozing on the porch. Rusty didn't care one bit about Karen's big meltdown. His ears were flopped down, his tongue was hanging out of his mouth, and he looked totally chill. Not a twitch, not a bark, just a big, sleepy furball soaking up the shady spot under Jake's chair. Jake, he wasn't worried at all, not even a little. He just sat there, calm as could be, watching Karen act like the world was ending. See, Jake had a secret, a little something special up his sleeve that Karen couldn't have guessed, not even if she tried a million times. He picked up his glass of iced tea, took a slow sip, and let a tiny smirk creep onto his face. That smirk was small, but it said a lot. It said he knew something, something big. Something that was going to make this whole mess way more fun than Karen thought. He rocked his chair back and forth, the wood creaking a little, and waited. He wasn't in a hurry. He didn't need to be. The time went by, tick-tock, tick-tock. Minutes passed, slow and steady. Karen didn't stop moving. She kept packing back and forth, like a toy that wouldn't wind down. Her lips were moving fast, muttering stuff about rules and safety. She'd say things like, "Dogs like that don't belong here," and "This is a nice neighborhood," over and over. She was so loud, a few birds flew out of the trees nearby, but she didn't see anything else. She didn't notice what was coming. She was too busy being mad to look around. Then something happened. A police car rolled up the street. It was super quiet, like a sneaky shadow sliding along the road. The tires barely made a sound, and the engine was soft. No sirens, no lights, just a slow creep. Two officers climbed out of the car. One was tall with short black hair, and the other was shorter with a big mustache. They both had on their blue uniforms, shiny badges glinting in the sun. Karen didn't hear them at first, but when she turned and saw them, her eyes got huge. They lit up like she'd just won the lottery or found a big pile of candy. "Finally!" she cried, clapping her hands together. She ran over to them, her flip-flops smacking even louder now. "Arrest that man and his monster dog!" she shouted, pointing at Jake and Rusty like they were the worst bad guys ever. The officers didn't say anything right away. They just stood there for a second, looking at her. Then they turned their heads and glanced at Jake. He was still sitting in his chair, sipping his tea, that tiny smirk still on his face. They looked at Rusty next, sprawled out on the porch, his big paws flopped over the edge. He was so asleep, he didn't even know the police were there. His tongue was still out, and his chest moved up and down with slow, sleepy breath. The officers didn't look mad or scared. They didn't pull out handcuffs or yell. Nope, something else happened instead. The tall officer, the one with the short black hair, started grinning. It wasn't a big grin, just a little one, like he'd heard a funny joke. His eyes twinkled and he looked back at Jake. The other officer, the one with the mustache, raised an eyebrow like he was curious. Karen didn't see that grin. She was too busy talking, her voice getting louder and faster. "That dog's a danger," she said. "He shouldn't be out here. I called you to fix this. Do your job." She stamped her foot, her arms crossed tight over her chest. But Jake, he wasn't scared. He didn't jump up or argue. He just took another sip of his tea, nice and slow, like he had all the time in the world. That smirk on his face got a tiny bit bigger. Why wasn't he worried? Why was the officer grinning? What was going on? Oh, you're going to love this part. See, Karen thought she was the boss here. She thought she'd won. She thought the police were going to march right up to Jake, grab him and Rusty, and drag them away. But she didn't know the truth. She didn't know Jake's secret, and she sure didn't know what was about to happen. The officers didn't rush over to Jake. They didn't shout at him or point. Instead, the tall one took a step closer to the porch, his grin still there. The shorter one followed, his mustache twitching like he was trying not to laugh. Karen kept talking, her voice like a buzzing bee that wouldn't stop. "I'm the HOA president," she said. "I make the rules around here. That dog's got to go." She was so sure she was right, so sure she had all the power, but she didn't see what the officers saw. She didn't know what they knew. Jake set his tea down on the little table next to his chair. The glass made a soft clink against the wood. He stretched his arms out, slow and easy, like he was waking up from a nap. Rusty still didn't move. His ears didn't even flick. He was out cold, dreaming about chasing squirrels or eating treats, whatever dogs dream about. The officers got closer, their boots tapping lightly on the ground. Karen followed behind them, her nose in the air, thinking she'd finally get her way. But here's the thing, something big was coming, something Karen couldn't guess. Jake's secret wasn't just a little trick or a funny story. It was something that was going to flip this whole day upside down. The officers weren't here to arrest him. They weren't here to take Rusty away. That grin on the tall officer's face, it meant he knew something too. Something that was going to make Karen wish she'd never picked up her phone. What was Jake's secret? Why were the officers so calm? And why was that one grinning like he couldn't wait to see what happened next? This story's heating up and it's about to get wild. Karen thought she was in charge, but she was wrong. So wrong. Stick around, because the best part's coming up fast. The taller officer, his name was Officer Daniels, didn't even look at Karen. He walked right past her, his boots tapping on the ground, and headed straight for Jake. Karen stood there, her arms still crossed, waiting for him to do what she wanted. But Officer Daniels didn't stop. He went up to Jake's porch, a big smile on his face, and said, "Hey, Miller." He held out his fist, and Jake bumped it with his own like they were old buddies. "How's Rusty holding up?" Officer Daniels asked, looking down at the big, sleepy dog. Karen's jaw dropped. Her mouth fell open so wide you could have tossed a ball in there. She didn't know what was happening. Why was the police officer acting so friendly? Why wasn't he arresting Jake like she told him to? Jake stood up from his rocking chair, slow and easy, like nothing big was going on. He stretched his arms and said, "Oh, just taking it easy after saving your butt last week." His voice was calm, and that tiny smirk was still on his face. That's right, Jake wasn't just some random guy sitting on a porch. He was special. He used to be a K9 handler. That means he worked with police dogs like Rusty every single day. And Rusty, he wasn't just any dog. That menace Karen was so mad about, he was a hero. Rusty had worked with the police for years. He was super smart, with a big nose that could sniff out bad guys hiding anywhere. He helped catch people who broke the law and kept the streets safe for everyone. Rusty wasn't a troublemaker. He was a good guy with fur. Officer Daniels laughed out loud. His laugh was big and happy, like he thought this whole thing was hilarious. He turned to Karen, who was still standing there with her mouth open, and said, "Ma'am, this dog's got more badges than half our squad." Badges are like prizes police get for doing a great job, and Rusty had tons of them. Officer Daniels tilted his head and looked at Karen. "You sure you want to waste our time with this?" he asked. His voice was nice, but it was clear he thought Karen was being silly. Karen's face changed fast. It went from mad to shocked to red, redder than a big ripe tomato. She looked like she'd just swallowed something sour. Her hands dropped to her sides and she started to stammer. But he's dangerous," she said, her voice all shaky. She pointed at Rusty again, but it didn't sound so tough anymore. Rusty picked that moment to open one eye just a little, like he was saying, "Huh, me." Then he closed it again and went right back to sleep. He didn't care what Karen said. He was too comfy. Jake chuckled and bent down to pat Rusty's head. His hand rubbed the dog's soft fur and Rusty's tail wagged once real slow. "Only to people who don't know better," Jake said, looking right at Karen. His words were simple, but they hit hard. He wasn't yelling or being mean, he was just telling the truth. Rusty wasn't dangerous to good people. He was dangerous to bad guys, the ones he used to chase when he worked with Jake. Karen didn't know that, though. She didn't know anything about Jake or Rusty until right now. The officers, Officer Daniels and the shorter one with the mustache, both started to chuckle. It was a quiet laugh at first, but then it got louder. They looked at each other, then at Jake, then at Karen. They couldn't help it, this was too funny. Karen's big plan to get Jake and Rusty in trouble was falling apart. She thought she was so smart, calling 911 and acting like the boss. But now, she was the one who looked dumb. Really, really dumb. Karen took a step back. Her flip-flops made a little squeak on the grass. She didn't know what to say. Her eyes darted from Jake to Rusty to the officers, like she was trying to figure out how this went so wrong. She mumbled, but no real words came out. Her face was still red and her hands were shaking a little. She'd been so sure she was right. She'd been so sure the police would take her side. But they didn't. They were laughing at her. Officer Daniels shook his head, still smiling. "Lady," he said to Karen. This dog's a hero. He's caught more bad guys than you've got rules in that HOA book of yours. He pointed at Rusty, who was snoring again, totally unbothered. You really think we're gonna arrest him, or Jake? He crossed his arms and waited like he wanted to see what Karen would say next. Karen didn't have an answer. She just stood there looking smaller than before. All her puffing up and shouting didn't mean a thing now. Jake leaned against the porch railing, watching her with that same calm smirk. He didn't need to say much. The truth was out, and it was big. Jake wasn't just some guy. Rusty wasn't just some dog. They were a team that used to work with the police, keeping everyone safe. And Karen, she just made the dumbest call of her life. The shorter officer, the one with the mustache, finally spoke up. You know, ma'am, he said, maybe next time check before you call us. His voice was soft, but it had a little tease in it. He was trying not to laugh again, but his mustache twitched. Karen's eyes got wide and she opened her mouth to argue, but nothing came out. She was stuck. She'd been so loud, so bossy, and now she had nothing left to say. Jake gave Rusty another pat. Good boy, he whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. Rusty's tail wagged again, just a little, like he knew he was the star of the show. The officers nodded at Jake like they were saying, nice job. Karen, though, she looked like she wanted to disappear. Her big moment was gone. She wasn't the hero here. Jake and Rusty were. What was going to happen next? Would Karen give up? Would she keep fighting? This was the big moment, the part where everything flipped upside down. Karen thought she had the power, but she didn't. Jake's secret was out, and it was awesome. Stick around, because this story's not over yet. The cops didn't arrest anyone that day, well, not really. Karen was still standing there, all puffed up and mad, going on and on about her HOA rules. She wouldn't stop talking, even after Officer Daniels told her Rusty was a hero dog. She kept saying stuff like, this is my neighborhood, and dogs like that don't belong here. Her voice was loud and whiny, and her face was still redder than a big cherry. She pointed at Rusty, then at Jake, then at the officers, like she thought they'd change their minds if she just kept yelling. But Officer Daniels had enough. He crossed his arms and looked right at her. Lady, he said, his voice strong but not mean, if you don't calm down, we'll ticket you for a false report. A false report means calling the police about something that's not true, like saying a sleepy dog is a big danger when he's not. Karen's eyes got wide and her mouth snapped shut fast. She didn't expect that. She thought the cops were on her side, but they were. They were on Jake's side and Rusty's too. That shut her up real quick. She didn't say another word, her lips pressed together tight like she was holding back a scream. She glared at Officer Daniels, then at Jake, then at Rusty, who was still snoozing on the porch. She didn't know what to do. She couldn't yell anymore and she couldn't win. So she did the only thing she could. She turned around and stormed off. Her flip-flops smacked the ground hard as she marched back to her house. She was muttering under her breath little grumbles like, this isn't over, and stupid dog, but nobody could hear her clearly. She looked mad, but she also looked silly, stomping away like a kid who didn't get her way. Jake watched her go, that tiny smirk still on his face. He didn't say anything mean, he didn't need to. Officer Daniels and the other cop, the one with the mustache, turned to Jake and started laughing. It was a big, happy laugh, like they'd just heard the best joke ever. Can you believe that? Officer Daniels said, shaking his head. calling us out here for Rusty. The mustache cop chuckled, too. She's got no idea who she's messing with, he said. Jake grinned and nodded. Nope, he said, she sure doesn't. The officers didn't stay long after that. They gave Jake another fist bump, said, "See you around, Miller," and headed back to their car. They waved at Rusty even though he was still asleep and didn't see it. The police car rolled away, quiet as it came, leaving Jake and Rusty alone on the porch again. The sun was still shining, the birds were still chirping, and everything felt calm once more. Karen was gone, and the big mess she tried to make was over. Now Jake sat back down in his rocking chair, picked up his iced tea, and took a sip. "Good boy, Rusty," he said softly. Rusty's tail wagged once, real slow, like he heard Jake in his dreams. But that wasn't the end of it, not really. See, news travels fast in a little neighborhood like this. By the time Monday rolled around, everybody knew what happened. The story spread like wildfire. People called it Karen versus the hero dog. Neighbors talked about it over their fences. Kids giggled about it while riding their bikes. Even the old lady who lived down the street, the one who never left her house, heard about it from her mailman. Everyone was saying the same thing. Karen picked the wrong fight, and Jake and Rusty came out on top. People didn't just talk, though they did stuff too. On Monday morning, Jake stepped outside and found a surprise on his porch. There was a little pile of dog treats sitting there, wrapped in a red ribbon. A note said, "For Rusty, the best dog ever." Jake smiled and picked it up. He figured it was from the family next door, the one with the two little kids who loved pets. But then later that day, more treats showed up. A bag of bones from the guy across the street. A chew toy from the lady who walked her poodle every morning. By Tuesday, Jake's porch had a whole stack of goodies for Rusty, treats, toys, even a big biscuit shaped like a star. People left notes too, saying things like, "Thanks, Rusty," and "You're awesome." Jake couldn't believe it. He laughed every time he found something new. Rusty loved it, of course. When Jake gave him the treats, his tail wagged like crazy. He'd chew on a bone, then nap, then chew some more. He didn't know why he was getting all this stuff, he was just happy to eat it. Jake kept the notes in a little box just because they made him smile. The whole neighborhood was on Rusty's side now. They didn't see him as a big, scary dog anymore. They saw him as a hero, the dog who beat Karen at her own game. And Karen, she didn't come around after that, not once. Her big house down the street stayed quiet. No more knocking on doors with rule books, no more measuring grass with a ruler. People said she was embarrassed, too shy to show her face after what happened. She'd been so loud, so bossy, but now she was hiding. Some kids even made up a song about it. Karen called the cops, but Rusty won the day. They'd sing it while riding their bikes past her house, laughing the whole time. Karen didn't come out to yell at them. She stayed inside, probably muttering to herself about how unfair it all was. Jake didn't mind. He didn't need Karen to say sorry or anything like that. He was just happy to sit on his porch with Rusty, like always. The neighborhood felt better without her stomping around. People waved at Jake more now. They'd stop by to say hi or pet Rusty when he was awake. It was like everyone was friends again, all because of that one crazy day. It turns out, even an HOA boss like Karen couldn't mess with a dog who's got the law on his side. Rusty didn't need to bark or fight, he just slept through it all and still won. Jake knew that from the start, that's why he wasn't worried. He trusted Rusty and he trusted the truth, and in the end that's what mattered. The treats kept coming, the laughs kept going, and Karen stayed away. Justice was served and it felt good. Okay, so what's the big lesson from all this? Let's think about it. Sometimes the loudest people, like Karen, don't really have much to say. They yell and stomp and make a big fuss, but when you look close, it's just noise. Karen was loud, right? She shouted about rules and called the cops, acting like she was the boss of everything. But in the end, she didn't win. She didn't have the power she thought she did. Her loud voice didn't mean she was right or strong. It just made her look silly. Now think about Jake and Rusty. They were the quiet ones. Jake didn't yell back at Karen. He didn't jump up and argue. He just sat there sipping his tea with that little smirk on his face. And Rusty, he didn't even wake up. He stayed asleep the whole time, snoring on the porch like nothing was wrong. But guess what? They had the real power. Jake knew his secret. He used to work with the police, and Rusty was a hero dog. They didn't need to be loud to prove it. They just stayed calm and the truth came out all by itself. That's pretty cool, huh? So here's the thing to remember. Sometimes the quiet ones are the strongest. They don't need to shout or fight to show who they are. They just wait and the world figures it out. Karen judged Rusty too quick. She saw a big dog and decided he was bad without even knowing him. She didn't know he was a hero. She didn't know Jake was more than just some guy on a porch. She messed with the wrong team and it backfired big time. Next time you see someone acting like Karen, judging fast or being mean, think about this story. You never know who they're really messing with. Maybe that quiet kid in class is super smart. Maybe that shy person has a big talent you can't see yet. Or maybe that sleepy dog is a hero in disguise like Rusty. People who judge too quick often miss the good stuff. They don't see the real power hiding right in front of them. And when the truth comes out, they're the ones who look foolish, not the quiet ones. What about you, viewer? What do you think? Have you ever met a Karen like this? Maybe someone who was loud and bossy but got it all wrong. I bet you've got some fun stories. Drop them in the comments below. I'm dying to hear what you've seen or heard. Did you ever see a quiet person surprise everyone like Jake and Rusty did? Tell me all about it. I love reading what you guys share. It makes these stories even better. And hey, if you liked this tale, give it a big thumbs up. It's a little way to say, wow, that was cool. And it helps me know you had fun. Stick around too, because there's more where this came from. I've got lots of stories to tell, fun ones, wild ones, maybe even some with more hero dogs. You don't want to miss out, right? So hit that subscribe button if you haven't yet, and let's keep the good times going. This story shows us something big. Real power doesn't need to shout. It can be quiet, steady, and strong like Jake and Rusty. So next time you're feeling small or quiet, don't worry. You might just have more power than anyone knows. Be yourself, stay cool, and let the truth do the talking. See you next time, friends. Can't wait to hang out with you again.